So, Game of Thrones then, eh? Right, I'm going to assume that most people who are subscribed to my channel are Game of Thrones fans. You just seem like that kind of people, to be honest. I'll also assume that pretty much everybody who's watching this has now seen the final episode. If you haven't, I'm going to spoil it to shit, so I'll give you a minute to make yourself scarce. Okay, they're gone. So what did we think? I personally thought it was a satisfactory ending. People saying it wasn't what they expected, it wasn't what they wanted. That's Game of Thrones. The whole point of Game of Thrones is it's the show that doesn't give you what you want and it doesn't do what you expect. I broadly concur with the general consensus that these last two seasons have been horribly rushed. They did seem to be trying to get everything done in 6 or 7 episodes that one of the old seasons of 10 episodes used to do. But as regards the conclusion to the whole story, well, here's the thing. It was never going to be a simple matter of getting the right person onto the throne. The books, the stories... Oh, disclosure, by the way, I haven't read the books. I actually made the conscious decision not to read the books when the show started, for the simple reason that I find if I watch an adaptation of anything where I'm too familiar with the source material, I just spend the whole time obsessing about how close or unclose it is to the source material rather than just trying to enjoy it as a work in its own right. So now the show's over, I might actually read the books, but the world that the story presents is far too morally complex for it ever to be a simple matter of getting the right person on the throne and then all will be well. Which is why you have the installation as king of the only character who has never expressed any interest in being king, and also a character who has achieved this kind of weird zen-like state whereby he no longer has any personal needs to fulfill. That's about as close as you're going to get to a sort of a satisfactory resolution which bodes well for the future. I did like the moment where Sam briefly invents democracy and then gets laughed out of court. That would be the best way to break the endless cycle of good king, bad king, would be for Westeros to slough off monarchy and become a republic. Although that wouldn't sit that comfortably in that kind of cod medieval universe that the story inhabits. And also there would be a certain savage irony in the fictional world of Westeros discovering the delights of democracy just as democracy appears to be going horribly wrong out in the real world. Now, I've only just seen the episodes, so I've only just switched my phone back on. I have absented myself from all social media for the past, 18 hours or so, ever since the episode aired in America, because I thought after 8 years of not having some idiot spoil the ending for me. But I don't know if everybody's quite as up in arms about this as they were about last week, about Daenerys going full Targaryen, as it were. I get that some people think it was a bit rushed and a bit sudden and that there wasn't enough build-up to it, but it's not like it wasn't very, very heavily telegraphed that that was how she was going to go. Ultimately, it was an illustration of something I've written about at length in my political columns, which is the moment you become unshakably convinced of your righteousness, you are, well, not doomed to commit atrocity, but it becomes a lot more likely. Becoming unshakably convinced in your own righteousness doesn't necessarily mean that you'll end up committing atrocity, but it is an essential first step. And I never expected to see Jon become king for the simple reason that it was just too bleeding obvious. I kind of like the way everybody's ended up in an appropriate place. You've Sansa's Queen of the North, Jon's kind of become king of the free folk, although the free folk don't really go in for kings. Arya's off to go and have adventures, and Bran is now sitting on what I assume is now the wooden and indeed wheeled throne. Now, here's an interesting thing. I had my own little fan theory. I had a hunch that we were going to see the throne melt down before the end, but I thought it was going to be something different. I thought what they'd have to do is melt the throne down in order to arm themselves against the White Walkers. They'd established that the only two things that can kill the White Walkers were dragonglass and Valyrian steel, and that there's a limited amount of Valyrian steel left because nobody knows how to make it anymore. Now, in the end, what they did, of course, was find the massive deposit of dragonglass underneath Stannis' castle. But what I thought they were going to do was suddenly realise that all the swords that got melted into the Iron Throne were Valyrian steel. And so in order to arm themselves against the zombies, they were going to have to melt the throne down, which, would have been a nice little ironic thing, that one thing that everybody's obsessively trying to claim, we have to destroy it in order to save the kingdom. I was trying to think what it was that the dragon scooping the dead Daenerys up in its talons and flying off into the sunset was reminding me of. And I've just remembered, it's the penguins floating away with the body of the dead penguin at the end of Batman Returns. And it was never going to be a big crash bang finale because, again, Game of Thrones doesn't do crash bang finales. If you look back through the whole run of the show, it's the penultimate episodes of seasons that have all the action, that have all the catastrophe, that have all the bloodshed. And then the last episode tends to be kind of subdued. It tends to be picking up the pieces and setting up the story threads for the next season. And this was kind of a piece with that. A lot of people have also noticed that the very last shot of the show is very like the very first shot of the show. It's people riding out into the snowy wilderness from the wall. So there's something satisfactorily cyclical about that. But on the other hand, I'm wondering if this might be a case of reduced expectations, because the last couple of seasons of the show haven't been great. Now, I don't know whether this is just because they have outpaced the book, whether it's because they ran out of original George R.R. Martin material a couple of seasons ago and have been kind of making it up now. I read that the books will not necessarily follow the resolution of the TV show, that George R.R. Martin might go off on his own. Certainly the last couple of seasons have been the least satisfying. People have been acting out of character. Whole characters have been introduced for no really good reason, as far as I can tell. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Euron Greyjoy. I still don't really know why he's in the story. I think it's just that it seemed to be a necessary component that you need to have one out-and-out sadist to boo at any given time. So we had Joffrey, then Joffrey got poisoned, and almost immediately Ramsay turned up, and then Ramsay was the big bad for 2 or 3 seasons. Then Ramsay got eaten by his own dogs, and yeah, Euron just kind of rocked up for no real reason, as far as I can tell, just to have another bad guy. It could be that his character was meant to have hidden depths, but they never really came out. For example, him dying with a big grin on his face, saying, "I'm the guy who killed Jaime Lannister," making him sort of Jaime's stalker might actually have been an interesting angle, and that sort of his obsession with bagging Cersei wasn't really anything to do with making himself king or because he was really hot for Cersei. It was because he wanted to outdo Jaime in some way. I mean, that would have been an interesting character arc, but it wasn't really hinted at until the last line. Or maybe that was the whole plan. Maybe he was just meant to be pointlessly evil until his last line of dialogue made everything clear, in which case, well, that's one way of doing it, I suppose. So like I say, I've been off social media basically ever since the show went out in the States, so I don't know whether people are as up in arms about it this week as they were last week, whether they're organising petitions to remake it. Look, can we just knock that shit on the head, please? First of all, I sympathise with the writers. I'm currently in the process of finishing the 3rd book in my science fiction trilogy, Terror's World, and the last instalment, Terror's War, which is the one I'm finishing right now. So I kind of understand, on an altogether smaller scale, the pressure of trying to come up with an ending for a story which spans multiple books, and which has, you know, even in my case, some devoted followers, and you want to come up with an ending which makes sense, which satisfies your readers, and which doesn't do anything gratuitous just to wrap everything up neatly. But can we please knock this petition to remake bullshit on the head, please? Petition to remake Game of Thrones, petition to remake The Last Jedi. Oh, fuck off. No. Look, here's the thing. If you don't like the way a story's gone, ignore it. It's just a story. It's not real, okay? I hate to break this to you. Game of Thrones ain't real. Star Wars ain't real, okay? If you don't like the way that the people who are in charge of writing those stories have written those stories, fucking ignore them and write your own, all right? Write your own fanfic. Have your own preferred version. Jesus, if you got the money, go right ahead and film your own fanfic, but you're probably going to get your ass sued. But you don't get to somehow try and take charge of somebody else's story and superimpose the ending on it that you'd prefer. That's not how it works, all right? It's not your story to change. One of my least favourite movies is Alien 3. And it's not because of how it ends. It's not because you can tell it's a heavily diluted version of what was an originally quite interesting concept. It's not just because the unfortunate decision to shave everybody's head and then film it through a dark brown filter means you literally can't tell the characters apart, so you don't get invested in any of them. No, it's the first 5 minutes of that film I think is just kind of out of order as storytelling. Because it basically rewrites the ending of Aliens. At the end of Aliens, it is very heavily implied that Ripley, Newt, Hicks, and what's left of Bishop make it home. All right? Now, you don't see them make it home, because that would be a pointless additional reel at the end of the movie, but it is very heavily implied that that story is over and that they make it home. What Alien 3 does is it starts the story up again and then says, no, they didn't make it home. There was an alien on board and everybody died. I fucking hate that movie. I think I think you're at liberty to write a story and give it as downbeat an ending as you want. But what Alien 3 does is it takes somebody else's story and adds a downbeat ending to it. I think that's just really mean-spirited storytelling. That'd be like if the sequel to Star Wars was taken completely out of George Lucas's hands and written by somebody else entirely, and began still at the medal ceremony from the end of the first movie, but then a chunk of Death Star debris lands on the temple and kills everyone except R2. So yeah, maybe it's because I'm a writer of stories myself, but I have a problem with the idea of trying to take over somebody else's story and change it just because you don't like it. If you don't like it, don't watch it, don't read it. Write your own story. That's what I did. Alright, I'm sure you've all got your own feelings on Game of Thrones, and I'm sure you're all sharing them vociferously on social media even as I speak, so I'm going to go and have a look. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching this. Please hit the subscribe button. Please follow the link to the Patreon page and consider supporting me if you do not already do so. Alright, Vala Magoulis. This video was made possible by the supporters of my Patreon project, who help me make fun things while receiving great perks and rewards. If you enjoyed it, why not follow the link and join us?